Today on the Fresh Brew Run Club, there's a new cutoff time for the 2024 Boston Marathon. Let's dive into it. Welcome to the Fresh Brew Run Club. Today's video, I'm talking cutoffs. No, not cutoff jeans, not cutoff t-shirts, but cutoff times specifically for the 2024 Boston Marathon. So this is breaking news today. The illustrious BAA, Boston Athletic Association, announced the cutoff time for the 2024 Boston Marathon. So a little bit of background on the Boston Marathon if you're not familiar. How many times am I going to say Boston Marathon in this video? Let's put a counter up there right now. So anyway, in order to run this marathon, you need to qualify for a certain time. So for me, I'm in my 30s. I need to run a 3-hour or better marathon in order to qualify to even apply for the Boston Marathon. Now, sometimes in previous years, if I were to do that and I apply, I'd get in no problem. Not this year. So the BAA announced this year that the cutoff time is 5 minutes and 29 seconds, which would mean for me, as someone who would have to run a 3-hour marathon or better, now instead I actually have to run a 2:54:31 marathon or better in order to actually qualify. So let's walk through the process. So last year you run your race, you run your 2-hour, 59-minute, 30-second marathon, and you qualify for the Boston Marathon, or at least you thought you qualified. There was an application process earlier in September where you take your information from that race and apply. And now the BAA has gotten all these applications in. They're reviewing the amount of people that qualified, and they're making a judgment of like, how many people are we gonna actually let into this race? So I'm gonna give you some numbers that are pulled straight from the BAA's website that just kind of walks through actually what they did this year, because I think it's kind of interesting. So some of their numbers this year, they had 33,058 total applicants. That means 33,058 people qualified for the Boston Marathon by hitting that Boston Marathon standard. You know, again, for me, that would be 3 hours or better. 22,019 qualified applicants have been accepted to date or are in the process of being accepted pending verification for their qualifying performance, because guess what? People cheat at marathons. I hate to say it, but they have to review all of these applications, which means 11,039 qualifier applicants were unable to be accepted into the 128th Boston Marathon. I was reading this on the running subreddit, and there are a lot of people that had the joy of thinking that they qualified for Boston and then were part of that 11,039 member group of people who just found out or are about to find out that they did not qualify for the Boston Marathon, despite running what they thought was the qualifying time, which, you know, again, for me, just putting myself into these shoes, I'm not close to that yet. One day I'd like to kind of get down there, but it's going to take me a long time. 5 minutes and 29 seconds is a pretty significant improvement that you have to make. That's not just like a rounding error where the last couple miles in your race went really well and you sort of surprised yourself. You have to actually train to run 5 minutes and 29 seconds better. So if you did not aim for that, if you didn't bake that into your training, you're probably one of those 11,039 people that are ending up somewhat disappointed today, which is always tough. Now, why do they do this? They want to limit the amount of participants to 30,000 people. You know, they don't want the streets of Boston to be too clogged with runners. They also want to make this kind of an exclusive event, right? You know, that's the appeal of the Boston Marathon. There are only a select number of runners who are actually good enough to qualify for this. So you're kind of in this elite group, which is why so many people want to run this. Now, you might say, wait a second, 30,000 people, they rejected 11,000, but 33,000 people applied. What's up with that? Well, there are other ways to qualify for the Boston Marathon. The biggest one is the charity qualification. Basically, if you raise enough money for select charities that the Boston Marathon approves, you can get a race entry. There's also another interesting way to get in. If you run 10 consecutive Boston Marathons, you can just automatically qualify. So there were 660 people that actually qualified that way, which is pretty cool. Some other stats that I thought were interesting as part of this press release that the BAA put out: citizens of 127 countries applied for the 128th Boston Marathon. Residents of all 50 states applied for entry. More than 528 qualifying marathons were utilized by athletes entering the Boston Marathon. Hold that thought. This is kind of the controversial portion of this announcement, at least what I saw on Reddit. People were kind of mad about some of these things. The 5 most popular qualifying races were 2023 Boston Marathon. Again, it's kind of a self-selecting group. If you can qualify for it, you can probably run that pace again. The Chicago Marathon, the London Marathon, the Berlin Marathon, and the California International Marathon. There'll be 11,391 athletes racing their first Boston Marathon. The youngest athlete accepted was 18 and the oldest was 82. That is goals right there. So in the advanced running subreddit, I saw a lot of people that were not super happy about some of the marathons that people are actually qualifying for Boston in. Because some of them are downhill. So there are some marathons out there that are specifically designed to help you qualify for Boston by having a certain elevation change where you start high and low, which is obviously easier to run. I believe there is a certain limit for marathons that are eligible to qualify, but there are some marathons out there that absolutely push that limit, that take you right up to the limit. So some people were not so happy about that, where, you know, maybe they ran a little bit of a harder marathon, and then there were a bunch of people, I saw a number as high as 25% of people that ran some of these downhill marathons. I don't know if that's true or not, but it is an interesting factor. So if you're thinking about trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon, don't just go for that goal pace. You got to factor in a significant amount of additional time. In this case, 5 minutes and 29 seconds, which again is a lot of time. The past few years, they haven't had a cutoff time, as people are probably more comfortable with traveling. They're going to more marathons. Shoes are getting better. Technology is getting better. You're probably going to see these cutoff times continue to happen, or the Boston Marathon will once again just change the qualification times if they kind of see this trend, because it's not a great experience to think that you qualified for Boston and sort of celebrate that and then get an email that's like, well, actually, you didn't. So let me know what you think. If there's anyone out there that qualified for Boston, you know, let me know your experience. Did you factor in a cutoff time when you set your goal pace, or are you just so good that it didn't even matter? Did you get kicked out of the Boston Marathon as part of that 11,000 person group that is unable to run because of the cutoff time? Let me know in the comments. I would love to run Boston someday, but you know, stuff like this kind of scares me a little bit, because that would be unbelievably disappointing. And also, if you're new to my channel, I make videos about running from the perspective of just kind of an average runner. I like running, I like coffee. I want to combine those two things into a YouTube channel. So I do shoe reviews. I have a weekly vlog where I just document my training and make some other videos. I want to do more timely stuff like breaking news in the running world. So if that's something you're interested in, throw me a subscription, you know, give it a like, leave a comment. Let's chop it up in the comments section. But that will be the video for today. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you soon.